Alicia Reynolds stares at her nursing license in flames as military police escort General Wallace Thompson through hospital doors. "You treated my son when everyone refused," he announces to the stunned crowd. What Alicia doesn't know, this act of compassion will expose decades of systematic discrimination at Lakeside Memorial. Before we dive into this powerful story of courage against injustice, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you believe healthcare should be equal for everyone, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice. How far would you go to save a life when the system is designed to stop you? The fluorescent lights of Lakeside Memorial Hospital cast harsh shadows across the emergency room as Alicia Reynolds checked the time. 3:15 in the morning. Her 12-hour night shift had already stretched into 14 hours, but the determined head nurse wouldn't leave until every patient received proper care. At 34, Alicia had earned respect among most staff for her unwavering dedication, despite the hospital's unspoken policies that made her job increasingly difficult. Lakeside served Atlanta's diverse population, but anyone working there longer than a week understood the unofficial hierarchy. Wealthy patients received immediate attention, while charity cases were processed with minimal care and quick discharges. Alicia brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, her dark skin showing signs of exhaustion as she reviewed patient charts. That's when the ambulance doors burst open, revealing paramedics wheeling in a middle-aged black man, struggling for each breath. "Male, 42, severe pneumonia, high fever," the paramedic reported, handing Alicia the clipboard. "Name's Marcus Johnson, no insurance." Those last two words made several staff members subtly back away, a reaction Alicia had witnessed countless times. She scanned his vitals. Temperature 104, oxygen saturation dangerously low. "Get him to Bay 3, Alicia ordered, ignoring the hesitation from her colleagues. As they transferred Marcus to the hospital bed, Alicia noticed the military tattoo on his arm. United States Army, 75th Ranger Regiment. The sight triggered memories of her father, also a veteran, who had died after being turned away from a hospital much like this one when Alicia was just 16. That loss had driven her into nursing with a promise to never let someone suffer the same fate. Richard Coleman, the hospital administrator, appeared almost immediately, as if summoned by some sixth sense that detected uninsured patients. At 55, the white executive had cultivated a reputation for fiscal responsibility that translated to minimal care for those unable to pay. "Basic workup only," he instructed Alicia, while glancing dismissively at Marcus. "Stabilize and discharge by morning. We need the bed." Alicia nodded professionally while seething inside. This wasn't unusual. Coleman frequently rounded the emergency department, ensuring resources weren't wasted. After Coleman left, Alicia performed a thorough assessment. Marcus's condition was far worse than initially reported. His breathing had become increasingly labored, and his X-rays showed extensive pneumonia in both lungs. "I served 3 tours, Marcus managed between painful breaths when Alicia asked about his service. "Got back 5 years ago. Been struggling since." His eyes, clouded with fever, held the same dignity Alicia remembered in her father's. "Just need to get back on my feet for my kids." The standard protocol would provide basic antibiotics and discharge him with a prescription he clearly couldn't afford. Alicia knew that without proper intravenous antibiotics and respiratory therapy, Marcus might not survive the week. After her shift officially ended, Alicia made a decision that would change everything. She checked the hospital layout, identifying an unused observation room in a wing under renovation. With careful precision, she transferred Marcus there, bringing necessary equipment without triggering alerts. Using her security clearance, she administered the proper antibiotics and set up continuous oxygen therapy. "This isn't standard," she told Marcus quietly, "but you deserve proper care." What Alicia didn't realize was that the hospital's security, cameras recently upgraded after budget cuts to nursing staff, captured her every move. She believed the renovation wing had inactive monitoring, but Coleman had insisted all areas remain under surveillance. As dawn broke, Alicia visited Marcus before leaving. His condition had already improved slightly, fever down to 100. And one. "Why are you helping me like this?" he asked. "Because it's right," she replied simply, "and because my father was a veteran too. He died because people saw his skin color and lack of insurance before they saw his service or his humanity." For the next 3 days, Alicia maintained this dangerous routine, providing proper treatment during quiet periods when she could slip away unnoticed. Marcus shared stories of combat and his 2 children waiting at home. "My son wants to be a doctor," he told her proudly. "My daughter's already talking about nursing school." On the 4th day, Alicia arrived for her shift to find Richard Coleman waiting with 2 security guards and printed screenshots from security footage. "Nurse Reynolds," he announced loudly enough for the entire emergency department to hear. "You've violated hospital protocol, misappropriated resources, and endangered this institution." The public humiliation was calculated as staff and patients watched Coleman strip Alicia of her ID badge. "You're suspended pending review, and I'll personally ensure your nursing license is revoked." The security guards escorted her out while Coleman ordered Marcus discharged immediately, despite his still fragile condition. "Policy violations cannot be tolerated," Coleman announced to the remaining staff as Alicia was marched out. "Let this be a lesson." As the doors closed behind her, Alicia realized she had sacrificed her career for a patient who might still die without completing his treatment. Alicia's small apartment felt suffocatingly quiet after the constant bustle of hospital life. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the suspension notice and wondering how she would make next month's rent without her income. The daughter of a veteran and a domestic worker, Alicia had climbed her way through nursing school with scholarships and night jobs, overcoming obstacles at every turn. Now, 12 years of dedicated service had vanished in an instant for doing what she believed was right. Her phone lit up with a text from Danielle Williams, a 28-year-old black nurse who had witnessed her humiliation. "They're calling it protocol violation, but we all know what it really is. Call me." Alicia had seen the patterns at Lakeside since her first day. Black nurses were routinely passed over for promotions despite perfect evaluations. Patient care disparities were obvious to anyone paying attention. White patients with good insurance received immediate attention, while black patients, especially those without coverage, waited hours for basic care. She had documented these discrepancies privately for years, hoping someday to have enough evidence to force change. That documentation now seemed like a liability that could further damage her career if discovered. The hospital board convened an emergency meeting the morning after her suspension. Through Danielle, Alicia learned they had unanimously supported Coleman's decision without questioning his motives or reviewing patient outcomes. The chairman had reportedly praised Coleman's quick action to maintain standards. By afternoon, local news websites carried the story with headlines like "Nurse Suspended for Protocol Violation" and "Hospital Maintains Standards Despite Staffing Challenges." The racial component remained carefully unmentioned in official statements, though comment sections quickly filled with coded language about certain people expecting special treatment. Meanwhile, Marcus Johnson had been discharged with a basic prescription for oral antibiotics. His intravenous treatment terminated prematurely. Without medical insurance or funds for the full prescription, he managed to purchase only 3 days' worth of medication, far from sufficient to treat his severe condition. His sister had created a GoFundMe page that raised barely enough to cover his emergency room copay. 3 days after her suspension, Alicia received the certified letter she had been dreading. The hospital's disciplinary committee had scheduled a hearing for the following week, an unusually accelerated timeline that gave her minimal preparation time. The letter outlined potential consequences: permanent termination, professional censure, and recommendation for license revocation. The telephone began ringing that evening with calls from blocked numbers. "Let it go if you know what's good for you," warned one anonymous male voice. "Some people just aren't worth your career," suggested another. After the third call, Alicia unplugged her landline. At Lakeside, Danielle had begun discreetly investigating patient records, discovering a disturbing pattern. Black patients with identical symptoms and similar insurance status as white patients received fewer diagnostic tests, shorter hospital stays, and less pain medication. The disparity was particularly pronounced for black men. More troubling, mortality rates for black patients with treatable conditions were significantly higher than national averages. Coleman, perhaps sensing this scrutiny, implemented new protocols requiring additional approvals for non-standard interventions, a policy that disproportionately affected the predominantly black nursing staff who often made critical care decisions during night shifts when doctors were unavailable. Danielle documented these changes, texting Alicia, "This is retaliation. He's targeting everyone who might have supported you." On the 5th day after his discharge, Marcus Johnson collapsed at home while playing with his children. His sister called an ambulance, but knowing Lakeside's reputation, insisted they take him to Grady Memorial instead, a hospital with fewer resources but a better reputation for treating all patients equally. Doctors there immediately readmitted him, shocked at his premature discharge given his condition. Whoever started his treatment knew what they were doing, the attending physician told Marcus's sister. Stopping it mid-course was dangerous and negligent. Alicia learned of Marcus's deterioration through Danielle and spent the night wrestling with guilt and fury. If she had simply followed protocol, she wouldn't be facing financial ruin and professional disgrace. But Marcus might have died from the beginning. Now he might die anyway, and her sacrifice would have been for nothing. She considered filing a formal complaint with state medical authorities, but lacked resources for legal representation. More critically, she knew the healthcare community was smaller than outsiders realized. Being labeled a troublemaker would effectively blacklist her from future employment, even if she somehow retained her license. The hospital's powerful legal team had already begun building their case, requesting Alicia's entire employment history and even contacting former colleagues for statements about her judgment and compliance with authority. Against these institutional forces, Alicia felt powerless but remained convinced she had done the only humane thing possible. What she couldn't know was that forces were already in motion that would transform her personal stand into something far larger. When 4-star General Wallace Thompson received the call about his son's hospitalization, he was attending a Pentagon strategy meeting. At 58, the decorated military leader had overcome decades of institutional racism to achieve one of the highest ranks in the United States Armed Forces. Now rushing through the corridors of Grady Memorial Hospital, the general's commanding presence caused staff and patients alike to step aside. "Where is my son, Marcus Johnson?" he demanded at the nurses' station, his uniform adorned with ribbons and medals earned through 35 years of service. The nurse directed him to the intensive care unit, where Marcus lay connected to ventilation, equipment, his condition critical but stabilizing. As Thompson sat by his son's bedside, memories flooded back of his own battles against discrimination. Despite graduating top of his class at West Point, he had watched less qualified white officers promoted ahead of him for years. Only through exceptional service and the mentorship of a few fair-minded superiors had he eventually broken through the military's racial barriers. "What happened?" Thompson asked the doctor, who came to check Marcus's vitals. The physician explained, "The situation, severe pneumonia initially treated correctly, but then prematurely discharged from Lakeside Memorial. Someone started him on the proper course of antibiotics and respiratory therapy," the doctor explained. "Then it was abruptly discontinued. Without that initial treatment, though, he wouldn't have survived long enough to get here." Thompson's military precision kicked in immediately. "I need to know who treated my son at Lakeside." After making several calls, he learned about Nurse Alicia Reynolds and her suspension. The general's aide compiled a comprehensive report within hours, detailing Alicia's spotless record, the hospital's troubling pattern of discriminatory practices, and Administrator Coleman's history of cost-cutting measures that disproportionately affected minority patients. "Sir, you should know that Coleman has refused to meet with military veteran advocates 3 times in the past year," his aide added. "He considers military status irrelevant to treatment protocols." Thompson attempted to schedule a meeting with Coleman, who promptly refused, claiming hospital policy prohibited discussing personnel matters with unrelated parties. "With all due respect, General," Coleman's assistant relayed, Military rank holds no special privilege in our healthcare system. Do you believe healthcare professionals should be punished for doing what's right, even when it breaks protocol? Comment number 1 if you think Alicia was justified in secretly treating Marcus. Or comment number 2 if you believe rules exist for a reason. Hit that like button if you're inspired by people who stand up for what's right despite the consequences. And subscribe to hear more stories of everyday heroes fighting against injustice. What would happen when a 4-star general faces off against a hospital system designed to prioritize profit over people? Thompson contacted Alicia directly, though she initially hesitated to speak with him. "I could lose my license permanently if I discuss a patient's case," she explained when he finally reached her. "They're already building a case against me." "Nurse Reynolds," Thompson replied with the calm authority that had guided troops through combat, "my son would have died without your intervention. This isn't just about one case anymore." Eventually, Alicia agreed to meet the general at a small coffee shop far from the hospital. She brought documentation of the systematic discrimination she had observed over years, statistics on wait times, treatment disparities, and staffing decisions that created 2 tiers of care based largely on race and economic status. "This happens everywhere," she explained, "but Lakeside is particularly blatant. Administrator Coleman has created a culture where treating certain patients fully is actually punished." Thompson shared his own experiences with discrimination, from being the only black cadet in his West Point class to having his combat leadership questioned, despite exemplary results. "The military isn't perfect," he acknowledged, "but we've made progress because people were willing to document problems and fight for change. Healthcare seems decades behind." As their conversation continued, Thompson received a call from his aide. Helen Matthews, the 60-year-old white chairwoman of Lakeside's board, had privately expressed concerns about Coleman's handling of several cases, including Marcus's. "She won't go on record," the aide reported, "but she's uncomfortable with the pattern she's seeing." Meanwhile, at Lakeside, Danielle Williams faced increasing hostility. Her patient assignments had suddenly doubled, always including the most demanding cases with minimal support. When she requested assistance from charge nurses, she was told to handle it or find another job. Other nurses who had shown support for Alicia received similar treatment. Coleman had effectively created a climate of fear that silenced potential dissent. Thompson leveraged his military connections to secure pro bono legal representation for Alicia through a prestigious law firm specializing in civil rights and healthcare policy. "This is bigger than one nurse or one patient," the general told the senior partner. "This is about equal treatment under the law." Learning of Thompson's involvement, Coleman initiated an immediate internal review to identify and eliminate potentially damaging evidence. Security footage from the days surrounding Marcus's treatment mysteriously developed technical issues. Patient satisfaction surveys from minority patients were flagged for verification and removed from summary reports. But Thompson's military experience had prepared him for institutional resistance. His aide discovered Coleman had been forced to leave 2 previous hospital positions after similar incidents, though confidential settlements had kept details from becoming public. Each time, he had been hired at a more prestigious institution with a higher salary, effectively rewarded for discriminatory practices that improved short-term financial performance. "It's not just Coleman," Alicia told Thompson during their second meeting. "The entire system incentivizes this behavior. Hospitals are rated on financial efficiency, not equity of care." Thompson nodded gravely. "In the military, we learned that discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's inefficient. You lose valuable talent and compromise the mission. Healthcare hasn't learned that lesson yet." As they formulated a strategy, neither realized how quickly and aggressively the hospital would move to silence them both. Alicia's disciplinary hearing, originally scheduled for the following week, was suddenly moved up to the next morning, clearly an attempt to proceed before Thompson could fully engage. She received the notification via email at 9:30 at night, giving her less than 12 hours to prepare. When she called her newly appointed lawyer, he was outraged but unsurprised. "They're trying to railroad you," he explained. We'll demand a postponement, but be prepared for them to deny it. Arriving at the hospital administrative offices the next morning, Alicia found herself facing not the standard 3-person review committee, but an expanded panel including the hospital's chief legal counsel and 2 board members known for their unwavering support of Coleman's policies. The conference room felt deliberately intimidating, with Alicia seated alone at one end of a long table while 8 hospital representatives occupied the other side. Her request for postponement was immediately denied on grounds of urgent patient safety concerns. What followed was less a hearing than an ambush. The committee presented a folder containing alleged previous protocol violations throughout Alicia's 12-year career, incidents she either didn't recognize or that had been dramatically mischaracterized. On March 12th, 2 years ago, you administered pain medication to a patient before receiving complete physician authorization, the chief of medicine stated, reading from a document Alicia had never seen. In July last year, you modified a treatment plan without proper documentation. When Alicia attempted to explain the contexts, emergencies where doctors had given verbal orders later documented, or situations where standard protocols clearly applied, the committee chairman cut her off. The pattern is clear, Coleman interjected smoothly. Nurse Reynolds consistently demonstrates a disregard for authority and proper procedure that endangers patients and exposes this institution to liability. The hospital's legal counsel then raised the stakes dramatically. The unauthorized administration of medication constitutes not just a firing offense, but potentially a criminal act. Practicing medicine without a license carries serious penalties in Georgia. This threat of criminal charges was clearly designed to force Alicia to accept termination without further protest. The message was unmistakable. Pursue this further and face not just professional consequences, but possible imprisonment. By afternoon, a local newspaper ran a story with the headline, "Reckless Nurse Endangered Patients, Hospital Claims." The article quoted sources familiar with the case, describing Alicia as a loose cannon who frequently ignored safety protocols. No mention was made of racial disparities in care or Marcus Johnson's military service. When Danielle Williams saw the article during her lunch break and vocally questioned its accuracy, she was immediately summoned to the nursing director's office. Your probationary period is being extended indefinitely due to concerns about your professional judgment, she was informed. Additionally, you're suspended for 3 days without pay for creating a disruptive work environment. This swift punishment sent a clear message to other staff considering speaking out. Meanwhile, Marcus Johnson's medical records at Lakeside underwent mysterious updates. His initial oxygen saturation readings were revised upward, his temperature adjusted downward, and his overall condition assessment changed from severe to moderate. These alterations, if left unchallenged, would make Alicia's interventions appear not just unauthorized, but unnecessary. General Thompson, having anticipated institutional resistance, had arranged a private meeting with hospital board members. 6 agreed to attend, but only 3 actually appeared, the others sending last-minute regrets after apparently being contacted by Coleman. Helen Matthews, the board chair, seemed genuinely troubled by the situation but visibly nervous. General Thompson, while we respect your military service and understand your concern as a parent, hospital operations follow different protocols than military operations, she began carefully. Mr. Coleman has the board's confidence in maintaining appropriate standards of care while managing our limited resources. Thompson responded with the calm precision that had made him effective in both combat and Pentagon politics. Ms. Matthews, I've reviewed patient outcome data for Lakeside compared to other regional hospitals. Black patients with pneumonia have a 78% higher mortality rate here than at Grady Memorial, despite your superior resources. That's not resource management, that's systematic failure. The board members shifted uncomfortably as Thompson continued presenting data points that revealed undeniable patterns of disparate treatment. But after his presentation, the hospital's position remained unchanged. Coleman had secured support from several wealthy donors who had made it clear that their continued financial backing depended on his leadership. The unfortunate reality, General, one board member explained privately after the others left, is that our major donors appreciate Richard's fiscal approach. Several have explicitly threatened to withdraw 8-figure pledges if he's removed. Outside the hospital, Alicia discovered her apartment building had suddenly issued an eviction notice claiming lease violations that had never previously been mentioned. That same evening, her utilities were mysteriously disconnected despite her accounts being current. This coordinated harassment suggested Coleman's influence extended well beyond hospital walls. A small group of community members, including several veterans who had heard about the case through Thompson's military connections, organized a protest outside Lakeside. Hospital security, suddenly expanded with additional personnel, quickly moved them to a distant parking area where they remained virtually invisible to patients or staff entering the facility. As Thompson's involvement became more widely known, anonymous online posts began questioning his military record and suggesting he had received preferential treatment due to diversity priorities. These calculated attacks on his distinguished service record bore the hallmarks of a professional smear campaign rather than random internet trolling. Most disturbing to Alicia was the discovery that her nursing school records had somehow been flagged with a professional conduct advisory that hadn't existed the previous week. This systematic attempt to retroactively tarnish her entire career revealed how thoroughly Coleman was willing to abuse his influence to discredit her. "They're not just trying to fire you," her lawyer explained grimly. "They're trying to ensure you never work in healthcare again. This is about making an example of you to maintain the status quo." Alicia, exhausted and increasingly isolated, found herself questioning whether the sacrifice had been worth it. But then she received a text message from Danielle with a photo of Marcus, now conscious and improving at Grady Memorial. "This is why you did it," the message read, "and why we can't stop now." The next morning, General Thompson arrived at Lakeside Memorial with a team of military legal advisors in full-dress uniform. The sight of 5 decorated officers marching purposefully through the hospital entrance created an immediate stir. But security personnel quickly blocked their path to the administrative offices. "Sir, we have instructions that you're not permitted on these premises, except as a patient," the head of security informed Thompson respectfully, but firmly. "I can have you escorted to the emergency department if you require medical attention." Thompson's response was measured but unyielding. "I'm here to discuss my son's care with Administrator Coleman. As his medical power of attorney, I have a legal right to review his complete treatment record." When this request was denied, Thompson and his team departed without protest, but their presence had been noticed by patients, visitors, and staff. Cell phone videos of the confrontation spread rapidly across social media, transforming what had been a local healthcare dispute into a national story about a decorated black general being denied access to his son's medical information. By evening, major news networks were covering the story. 4-star general denied hospital access and decorated military leader challenges hospital over son's care ran as headlines across cable news. Coleman's attempt to minimize the incident as a routine security protocol only intensified public interest in why a general would be treated this way. As media attention increased, former Lakeside patients began coming forward with their own stories of discriminatory treatment. An elderly black woman described waiting 8 hours for treatment of a heart attack, while white patients with less severe conditions were seen immediately. A Hispanic veteran recounted being denied pain medication for a combat injury, while a white patient with similar symptoms received immediate relief. These testimonies created a damning pattern that couldn't be dismissed as isolated incidents. Inside the hospital, the increased scrutiny created unexpected allies. A pharmacy technician anonymously provided records showing discrepancies in pain, medication administration based on patient demographics. A billing specialist leaked documents revealing different collection procedures for patients from predominantly white versus predominantly black zip codes. Most significantly, a junior doctor provided documentation of directives to limit certain high-cost diagnostic tests for patients without premium insurance, directives that disproportionately affected minority patients. Thompson arranged temporary housing for Alicia after her apartment situation became untenable, placing her in a secure location with protection from a private security firm staffed by veterans. "This isn't just for your safety," he explained. "We need to ensure the evidence you've collected remains secure." Their cautious approach proved prescient when Alicia's apartment was broken into the following night, her computer and files taken while other valuables were left untouched. The investigation had expanded beyond Lakeside when Dr. Patricia Chen, a 45-year-old Asian-American board member, reached out to Alicia through an encrypted messaging app. "I can't be seen communicating with you," her message explained, "but I've been troubled by what I've observed since joining the board last year." They arranged to meet at a coffee shop 30 miles outside Atlanta, where Dr. Chen arrived wearing sunglasses and a hat as a simple disguise. "I've been analyzing patient outcome data across departments," she explained, passing a thumb drive to Alicia. "The disparities are statistically impossible to attribute to chance or socioeconomic factors alone. Black patients with identical insurance coverage and presentation have consistently worse outcomes than white patients at Lakeside." The data covered 5 years and thousands of patients, providing irrefutable evidence of systematic discrimination that extended far beyond individual provider bias. "Why haven't you brought this to the board?" Alicia asked. Dr. Chen's expression tightened. "I tried 6 months ago. Coleman convinced them it was methodologically flawed and had me removed from the Quality Improvement Committee. Since then, I've been systematically excluded from meaningful oversight roles despite my qualifications." Meanwhile, Coleman accelerated efforts to discredit Alicia. He approached a nurse who had been fired 2 years earlier for medication errors, offering to provide positive references if she would testify that Alicia had previously violated protocols. Desperate for employment, the nurse reluctantly agreed, signing a prepared statement claiming Alicia had encouraged others to circumvent safety procedures. This manufactured evidence would be devastating in any formal proceedings. Marcus, now recovering steadily at Grady Memorial, agreed to record a video statement describing his experience. "I was treated like I wasn't worth saving at Lakeside," he stated clearly, still showing signs of his illness, but speaking with conviction. "Only one nurse saw me as a human being deserving of care. For that she lost everything while I nearly lost my life." Thompson's military connections yielded another crucial development: a federal investigation into possible civil rights violations in healthcare delivery. While hospitals typically faced only state-level oversight for most operational issues, systematic discrimination could trigger federal intervention, particularly when veterans' rights were involved. Coleman discovered through his political connections that the board's support was wavering in the face of mounting evidence and public scrutiny. He implemented increasingly desperate measures to maintain control, including instructing department heads to prepare loyalty statements, affirming their support for current leadership. Those who hesitated received immediate scrutiny of their department's budgets and staffing. Yet even as Coleman fought to maintain his position, cracks in the institution's unified front were spreading. Helen Matthews privately contacted Thompson to discuss potential paths forward that might address legitimate concerns while allowing the hospital to save face. Alicia, meanwhile, received an unexpected job offer from Northside Hospital, Lakeside's main competitor, with a substantial salary increase and promotion to a leadership position. The offer came with one condition: she must drop all allegations against Lakeside and sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding her experiences there. The timing suggested coordination between the institutions to silence the growing controversy, before it prompted broader scrutiny of healthcare practices throughout the region. "They're trying to buy your silence," Thompson observed when Alicia showed him the offer letter, "which means they're worried about what happens if you keep speaking." Alicia stared at the letter, tempted by the financial security it offered after weeks of uncertainty and mounting legal expenses. "This would solve my problems," she admitted, "but what about the next patient, or the next nurse who tries to do the right thing?" Thompson nodded with understanding. "In the military, we have a saying: the easy path and the right path are rarely the same. Whatever you decide, my team will support you." As they considered next steps, Neither could anticipate how dramatically the situation would escalate when Coleman discovered the full extent of the evidence assembled against him and the growing coalition determined to expose the truth. The national spotlight intensified when American Spotlight, a primetime news program, featured Alicia and Marcus's story in a special report titled Care Denied, Race and Healthcare in America. The segment included interviews with both Alicia and Marcus, alongside commentary from healthcare policy experts and civil rights attorneys. Most damaging to Lakeside were the statistical analyses showing clear patterns of disparate treatment and outcomes. When controlling for all relevant factors, one health economist explained, Black patients at Lakeside Memorial are 34% less likely to receive advanced diagnostic testing and 42% more likely to be discharged early compared to white patients with identical symptoms and insurance. Lakeside's administration, caught unprepared by the scope and professionalism of the report, scrambled to control the narrative. They hired Crisis Management Solutions, a prestigious firm specializing in institutional reputation repair, at a reported cost of $75,000 per week. Their initial strategy involved portraying Alicia as a well-intentioned but dangerously non-compliant employee whose actions could have harmed patients. While we appreciate Nurse Reynolds's compassion, their statement read, healthcare protocols exist to protect patients from well-intentioned but potentially dangerous improvisations. This approach backfired when medical professionals from across the country began publicly questioning whether Lakeside's protocols aligned with standard medical practice. In what medical universe is denying appropriate antibiotics to a patient with severe pneumonia considered proper protocol? Asked the president of the National Nurses Association in a widely shared social media post. Thompson's military connections yielded another significant development, a congressional inquiry into healthcare discrimination affecting veterans. Congressman James Howard, whose district included several military bases, announced hearings to examine whether those who served our country receive equitable medical treatment regardless of race or economic status. Coleman was named in the EEE preliminary witness list, alongside hospital executives from across the country. Inside Lakeside, the unified front presented by administration began fracturing as staff divided into factions. Many healthcare providers, particularly those from minority backgrounds, had long recognized the patterns Alicia had documented but feared professional consequences for speaking out. Now, with external validation and protection, more came forward, with their own observations. The tension became visible to patients, with some nurses and doctors wearing small blue ribbons signifying support for equal care, while others displayed pins with the hospital logo to show institutional loyalty. Coleman's position weakened further when a hospital IT employee leaked emails from several years earlier in which he had referred to the predominantly black neighborhood surrounding Lakeside as a resource drain and suggested the hospital should focus on attracting patients from north of the interstate. These nakedly racist comments contradicted his public persona as an administrator simply focused on financial stability. The hospital's major donors began responding to the controversy. Though not uniformly, 3 prominent philanthropists announced they were suspending planned gifts pending resolution of the discrimination allegations. However, several others publicly reaffirmed their support for the current administration, praising Coleman's financial stewardship during challenging times for healthcare. This financial pressure intensified the board's internal conflict, with members increasingly divided between ethical concerns and financial pragmatism. Alicia faced a coordinated character assassination campaign as anonymous sources provided carefully selected fragments from her personal history to sympathetic journalists. Her college social media posts were mined for controversial statements, resulting in headlines like, "Suspended nurse previously expressed anti-authority views." One particularly damaging story quoted an ex-boyfriend describing her as always looking for racism even when it wasn't there, though he later claimed his comments had been taken out of context. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in healthcare? Comment number 1 if you or someone you know has experienced unequal treatment in a medical setting, or comment number 2 If you've seen a healthcare professional stand up against injustice like Alicia did, hit the like button if you believe. Our veterans deserve the highest quality care regardless of race or economic status, and subscribe to hear how this powerful story concludes. Will General Thompson's military authority be enough to overcome institutional racism, or will Lakeside's powerful connections silence the truth? Marcus, now recovered enough to travel, made a powerful public appearance at a veterans rally organized by Thompson's military colleagues. Walking slowly but standing tall, he described his experience at Lakeside in simple but emotional terms. "I served this country proudly for 8 years," he told the crowd of hundreds. "I never expected special treatment, just the same care anyone else would receive. Instead, I was treated as if my life had less value because of my skin color and financial situation. Without Nurse Reynolds breaking their so-called protocols, I wouldn't be alive today." His testimony, broadcast live on several news channels, humanized the statistics and policy discussions surrounding the case. Thompson's own military record became a central element of the public narrative as supporters emphasized his dedication to country and leadership integrity. His long list of decorations, including the Silver Star and multiple Bronze Stars, stood in stark contrast to allegations that he was simply causing trouble for personal reasons. Veterans organizations across the country issued statements of support, with many members sharing their own experiences of healthcare discrimination. The State Medical Board, under increasing pressure from both the public and political leaders, announced a formal investigation into Lakeside's practices. While careful to note that no conclusions had been reached, the board's involvement represented a significant escalation with potential consequences for the hospital's accreditation and Coleman's professional standing. Coleman, sensing his position becoming untenable, made a desperate final attempt to resolve the situation on his terms. Through an intermediary, he offered to reinstate Alicia with a promotion to Director of Diversity Initiatives, a newly created position with a substantial salary increase, if she would sign a statement acknowledging that miscommunications rather than discrimination had caused the controversy. "Mr. Coleman recognizes your commitment to patient care," the offer letter stated, "and believes your passion could be channeled productively within our institutional framework." The transparent attempt to co-opt her into the very system she was challenging only strengthened Alicia's resolve. "They're not offering change," she told Thompson after receiving the offer. "They're offering me a title to create the appearance of change while continuing the same practices." Thompson nodded with understanding. "It's an old tactic. When you can't defeat a challenge, attempt to absorb it. Your refusal tells me we're making real progress." Neither could anticipate how. Quickly, events would accelerate as Coleman realized his traditional tactics had failed to contain the growing crisis. The relentless pressure began manifesting physically for Alicia as the battle entered its second month. What had started as occasional tension headaches evolved into full anxiety attacks that left her gasping for breath, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. During one particularly severe episode, she found herself curled on her temporary apartment floor, convinced she was having a heart attack until Thompson's security detail called in a medic who recognized the symptoms. "This is your body's response to prolonged stress," the medic explained gently. "You've been running on adrenaline for weeks." Despite growing public support and mounting evidence in her favor, doubt gnawed at Alicia during quiet moments. Had she been reckless in treating Marcus without authorization? Would a more patient, systemic approach to changing Lakeside's culture have been more effective than her direct action? These questions triggered memories of her childhood in Baltimore, where her mother had worked as a housekeeper for wealthy white families, while raising 3 children alone after Alicia's father died. "There are 2 sets of rules in this world," her mother had explained, when 8-year-old Alicia questioned why her school textbooks were outdated while the children she babysat had brand new ones. "But that doesn't mean you accept the unfair ones. You work twice as hard, document everything, and when the moment comes to stand up, you make sure your ground is solid." Those words had guided Alicia through nursing school, where she'd faced professors who assumed she needed extra help despite her top grades, and through her career where patients sometimes requested a different nurse upon seeing her dark skin. She had always responded with impeccable professionalism, building a reputation for excellence that made her current situation all the more painful. Marcus Johnson's family began receiving anonymous threatening phone calls after his television appearance. "Your son should have kept his mouth shut if he wants to stay healthy," one caller warned his sister. Thompson immediately arranged military police protection for the family, stationing officers at their home and accompanying Marcus to medical appointments. "This isn't unusual in high-profile cases involving institutional misconduct," Thompson explained, though the strain showed in his usually composed demeanor. "Intimidation is often the last resort when facts aren't in their favor." At Lakeside, Danielle Williams was terminated after security cameras allegedly captured her accessing patient records outside her assigned cases. In reality, she had been documenting disparities in care as evidence of systematic discrimination. "I was looking up mortality rates for pneumonia patients," she explained to Alicia over coffee, unemployment papers spread before her. "They were reviewing the security logs and caught me." Her termination notice cited breach of confidentiality protocols, without specifying which records she had inappropriately accessed, making the allegations impossible to directly refute. The hospital's investigation had expanded beyond Alicia to anyone perceived as sympathetic to her cause. Coleman, growing increasingly desperate as the controversy showed no signs of fading, obtained Alicia's personal information through contacts at the state nursing board. This information, including her parents' address and her sister's workplace, became the basis for implied threats during settlement discussions. "We're concerned about the stress this situation is causing to everyone involved," Coleman's lawyer mentioned casually during one meeting, "including family members at, let me check my notes, East Baltimore Community College and Pinewood Seniors residents." The message was unmistakable. "We can reach beyond you to those you love." The hospital board convened an emergency session to discuss Coleman's continued leadership, with several members now openly questioning whether maintaining his position was worth the reputational and legal risks. The meeting quickly devolved into faction-based arguments, with Coleman's supporters emphasizing the financial implications of removing him, while critics focused on the mounting evidence of discriminatory practices. "This isn't just about one nurse or one patient anymore," observed board member Dr. Chen. "We're facing potential federal civil rights investigations and class action lawsuits." Coleman countered by presenting financial projections showing potential donor withdrawal if leadership changes were made in response to unsubstantiated allegations. The board remained deadlocked, unable to reach consensus on a path forward. During a private moment after the meeting, Thompson revealed to Alicia why this case resonated so deeply with him beyond his son's involvement. "My younger brother had sickle cell disease," he explained, his customary military composure momentarily faltering. 20 years ago, he went to an emergency room during a pain crisis. They assumed he was drug-seeking because he was a young black man asking for pain medication. By the time they took his condition seriously, organ damage had begun. He died 3 days later. This personal tragedy had informed Thompson's lifelong commitment to fighting discrimination in all institutions. "Systems don't change because it's right," he continued. "They change when the cost of discrimination exceeds the benefit. That's what we're establishing now." Alicia's home was vandalized with racist graffiti, the words "nurse quota" spray-painted across her door alongside more explicit slurs. Rather than intimidating her community, the attack galvanized support. Neighbors she had barely known organized to clean the damage, repaint her door, and establish an informal neighborhood watch. Veterans from local VFW posts volunteered security shifts, creating a visible presence that deterred further incidents. The state investigation into Lakeside uncovered evidence of potential insurance fraud targeting minority patients. Documentation revealed patterns of billing for services never provided while simultaneously undertreating conditions, maximizing revenue while minimizing costs through discriminatory practices. This discovery elevated the case from civil rights concerns to potential criminal violations, significantly raising the stakes for Coleman and hospital leadership. Coleman, sensing the walls closing in, reached out to political connections cultivated through years of strategic campaign contributions. Several state representatives contacted Thompson, suggesting that pursuing the case might adversely affect military funding priorities in upcoming budget negotiations. These thinly veiled threats to Thompson's military projects represented a significant escalation, attempting to leverage his professional responsibilities against his personal fight for justice. Meanwhile, Alicia received a formal settlement offer that stunned her with its magnitude. $2 million in exchange for dropping all claims, retracting all statements, and signing a lifetime non-disclosure agreement regarding Lakeside's practices. The offer was presented with explicit time pressure, requiring acceptance within 48 hours. "This is life-changing money," her lawyer acknowledged during their review of the document. "But you need to understand what you're giving up. Not just your right to speak about what happened, but your ability to help change the system." As Alicia considered the offer, Thompson faced his own pressure from military superiors concerned about his high-profile involvement in a controversial civilian matter. "While your personal concern for your son is understood," his commanding officer noted during a private call, "your actions are being perceived as an official military position on a domestic healthcare dispute." Several congressional committees have expressed concern about appropriate boundaries. Despite these mounting personal costs, both Alicia and Thompson recognized they had progressed too far to retreat. The evidence they had gathered pointed to systematic discrimination affecting thousands of patients, making their individual sacrifices meaningful beyond their personal circumstances. Yet neither could deny the grinding toll of fighting an institution with seemingly limitless resources and influence. "Sometimes I wonder if we can actually win," Alicia admitted during a particularly difficult moment. "They can replace Coleman and claim reform while continuing the same practices under different names." Thompson's response reflected his battlefield experience. In asymmetric warfare, victory isn't about destroying the larger force. It's about making the cost of continuing too high to bear. We're not just fighting for one decision, we're changing their calculation for every future decision. The federal investigation findings were never meant to become public before official proceedings began, but when key sections appeared on the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the impact was immediate and dramatic. Federal investigators have documented pervasive and systematic discrimination at Lakeside Memorial Hospital, with black patients receiving demonstrably inferior care compared to white patients with identical conditions and insurance status, the article began. While the leaked document didn't identify sources, it contained detailed analyses of thousands of patient records showing statistically significant disparities in treatment protocols, admission decisions, pain management, and length of stay. Most damaging was the conclusion that these disparities appear to reflect institutional policies rather than individual provider bias, directly implicating hospital leadership. Coleman immediately launched internal investigations to identify potential leaks while simultaneously directing staff to locate and destroy any additional potentially damaging records. Routine document management was the official explanation for the sudden shredding and deletion activities observed throughout administrative offices. Hospital IT staff reported receiving urgent directives to optimize server space by removing specific categories of archived emails and treatment records. These desperate attempts at evidence destruction only reinforced the perception of guilt, particularly when several principled employees documented and reported these activities to investigators. The hospital board convened an emergency session to vote on Coleman's continued leadership. The meeting lasted 14 hours, as factions argued increasingly bitter positions. Helen Matthews, who had previously wavered between concern and institutional loyalty, presented a detailed financial analysis showing Lakeside's potential liability if the case proceeded to formal civil rights proceedings or class action lawsuits. "The settlement offers thus far have been substantial," she noted, "but represent a fraction of our exposure if these findings are substantiated in court." Despite this sobering assessment, the final vote on Coleman's removal ended in a tie, with half the board still fearing donor backlash if they appeared to capitulate to external pressure. The deadlock effectively maintained the status quo while leaving Coleman severely weakened. As the board meeting concluded without resolution, emergency alarms sounded from the intensive care unit. Tanya Williams, a 62-year-old black woman admitted with symptoms identical to a white patient in the adjacent bed, had gone into cardiac arrest after receiving noticeably different monitoring and intervention protocols, despite emergency resuscitation efforts. She died while the white patient with the same presentation recovered uneventfully. This tragedy, occurring amid intense scrutiny of the hospital's practices, crystallized the human consequences of the discriminatory patterns in a way statistics could not. Several nurses present during the incident immediately documented the disparities in care, no longer willing to remain silent despite potential professional consequences. Thompson delivered a powerful address at a veterans rally the following day, his military uniform and decorations providing visual reinforcement of his authority and credibility. "I've led American soldiers from every background, religion, and ethnicity," he told the crowd of hundreds. "When bullets are flying, no one asks about the color of the person providing covering fire. We stand together, or we fall divided. Healthcare should operate by the same principle, equal treatment for all Americans regardless of skin color or economic status." The speech, broadcast live on several networks, reframed the controversy from a specific hospital dispute to a fundamental question of American values. "Those who serve this country deserve better," Thompson continued, "but so does every citizen. Equal protection under law isn't a slogan, it's a promise our institutions must fulfill." National medical organizations began issuing statements condemning discriminatory healthcare practices, with the American Medical Association announcing new guidelines for identifying and addressing institutional bias. The American Hospital Association established a task force on healthcare equity, explicitly citing the Lakeside situation as evidence of needed industry-wide reforms. Coleman, increasingly isolated but still controlling day-to-day operations, implemented his most desperate strategy yet. Security cameras captured him entering the medication storage area after hours, followed by reports that controlled substances were missing during inventory. Anonymous tips to the state nursing board claimed Alicia had a history of medication misappropriation, allegations designed to be difficult to disprove and devastating to her credibility and license. What Coleman hadn't anticipated was that hospital security had upgraded their camera systems the previous month, providing high-definition footage, clearly showing him placing items in his pocket while looking furtively around. This evidence of direct evidence tampering, reported by a security supervisor with military background connections to Thompson, represented a potential criminal act rather than merely administrative misconduct. The hospital board reconvened, this time with new information from their own legal counsel about personal liability board members might face for knowingly allowing discriminatory practices to continue after formal notification. This legal reality, combined with the recent patient death and evidence of Coleman's increasingly erratic behavior, finally shifted the balance of power. Helen Matthews, who had maintained professional neutrality throughout the controversy, decisively broke the deadlock. "I became a healthcare administrator to improve lives," she stated during the closed session. "Whatever our financial concerns, we cannot in good conscience maintain leadership that compromises our fundamental mission of equal care for all patients." Several nationally recognized healthcare leaders publicly supported Alicia, with the former Surgeon General issuing a statement praising healthcare professionals who prioritize patient welfare above institutional convenience. Medical school. Deans from 3 prestigious universities published an open letter questioning whether protocols that result in demonstrably worse outcomes for minority patients can be considered ethical medical practice regardless of financial considerations. Coleman, sensing his position becoming untenable, made one final desperate attempt to maintain control by threatening board members directly. "I've been collecting information for years," he informed several key figures privately. "I know which few approved policies with full knowledge of their discriminatory impact. If I'm removed, that information becomes public." This attempt at mutually assured destruction might have succeeded in previous circumstances, but the accumulated evidence and public attention had fundamentally altered the power dynamics. Thompson, leveraging both his military authority and newly formed connections with hospital ownership corporations, arranged an emergency meeting with Lakeside's parent company executives. "This isn't just a public relations problem," he informed them with the strategic precision that had made him effective throughout his military career. "This is an existential threat to your healthcare portfolio, if not addressed decisively." The evidence he presented included not just the discrimination documentation, but now proof of obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and potential criminal violations by the current administration. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would determine not just individual fates, but the future direction of an institution serving thousands of patients annually. The morning sunlight streamed through Lakeside Memorial's glass entrance as General Wallace Thompson arrived in full-dress uniform, accompanied by an honor guard of military police and legal representatives from the Department of Defense. The delegation moved with disciplined precision through the lobby, drawing stunned attention from staff and patients alike. Unlike previous attempts to meet with administration, this time Thompson had coordinated with hospital ownership directly. Security personnel, clearly briefed in advance, escorted the group to the main boardroom where an emergency session was already in progress. Inside, board members fell silent as Thompson entered, his four-star insignia and rows of combat decorations, providing wordless testimony to his authority and service. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began without preamble, "I'm here representing not just my son, but every veteran and citizen entitled to equal treatment under law. Today, you have a choice about which side of history this institution will occupy." The board chair, Helen Matthews, nodded respectfully before responding. "General Thompson, the board has just concluded a vote regarding Administrator Coleman's leadership." She paused, glancing around the table where several members avoided eye contact. "By a margin of 8-4, the board has terminated Richard Coleman's employment effective immediately. We've also voted to cooperate fully with all ongoing investigations into hospital practices." The announcement triggered immediate activity throughout the hospital, as Coleman was escorted from his office by security, his access credentials deactivated while he gathered personal belongings. Staff gathered in corridors, many openly celebrating, while others watched with concern about institutional stability. Before Coleman left the premises, federal agents served him with legal documents outlining potential charges, including fraud, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and civil rights violations. His expression, previously confident to the point of arrogance, crumbled as he realized the comprehensive nature of the case against him. Reporters gathered outside captured his departure, creating images that would appear on news websites within minutes. The Hospital Ownership Corporation announced a complete leadership overhaul, bringing in a respected healthcare administrator with experience in community medicine and equity initiatives as interim CEO. Their public statement acknowledged serious institutional failures and committed to comprehensive reforms, ensuring equal treatment for all patients regardless of race, ethnicity, or economic status. Alicia Reynolds received official notification of her reinstatement that afternoon, along with promotion to the newly created position of Director of Patient Advocacy and Equality. Unlike Coleman's previous offer designed to silence her, this position came with explicit authority to implement and monitor equity measures throughout the hospital. "We're not asking you to forget what happened," Matthews told her during their meeting. "We're asking you to help ensure it never happens again." Danielle Williams and other staff who had faced retaliation for supporting Alicia were reinstated with back pay and formal apologies. An independent review committee was established to examine all disciplinary actions from the previous 3 years, identifying and remedying cases where discrimination may have influenced personnel decisions. The hospital announced new comprehensive policies for ensuring equitable care, formally named the Marcus Johnson Protocols, in recognition of the patient whose case had exposed systematic problems. These guidelines established clear metrics for monitoring treatment disparities and created accountability measures at every level of hospital operations. A National Healthcare Commission, inspired by the Lakeside case, began investigating discrimination patterns across institutions nationwide. Their preliminary findings suggested the problems exposed at Lakeside reflected widespread industry practices rather than isolated incidents, creating momentum for structural reforms throughout American healthcare. Alicia developed a training program for identifying and addressing both explicit and implicit bias in medical treatment, which quickly gained adoption beyond Lakeside. Medical schools requested the curriculum, recognizing the need to address healthcare disparities beginning with professional education. Marcus Johnson, fully recovered and determined to transform his experience into positive change, accepted a position on Lakeside's newly formed Patient Advisory Board, providing perspective from veteran patients. His calm dignity and forgiveness toward the institution that had nearly cost him his life inspired both staff and fellow patients. General Thompson established the Johnson Foundation for Healthcare Equality, dedicating resources to identifying and addressing discriminatory practices nationwide. This fight didn't end with one hospital or one administrator, he explained during the foundation's launch. It continues wherever patients receive different care based on who they are rather than what they need. 6 months after Coleman's removal, Lakeside Memorial released its first equity report, showing measurable improvements in treatment protocols and patient outcomes across demographics. Waiting times, pain management approaches, and diagnostic thoroughness had equalized significantly, demonstrating that institutional commitment could indeed transform entrenched practices. The final scene unfolded in Lakeside's emergency department, where Alicia treated an elderly black veteran with the same careful attention she had shown Marcus months earlier. As she adjusted his medication, she noticed the new hospital leadership observing not with suspicion, but with approval. The veteran squeezed her hand gratefully. "Things feel different here now," he commented. "Like they see me as a person, not just another charity case." Alicia smiled, the weight of months of struggle lifting slightly. "That's exactly what we've been fighting for," she replied, "and we'll keep fighting until it's not remarkable anymore. Just standard care for everyone." As she completed her assessment, she glanced at the hospital's new mission statement, prominently displayed on the wall. Equal care, equal dignity, equal value. The words represented not just an aspiration, but a measurable commitment backed by transformed policies and ongoing oversight. The battle had extracted personal costs from everyone involved, but the systemic changes would benefit thousands of patients for years to come. What do you think about Alicia and General Thompson's fight against healthcare discrimination? Was their struggle worth the personal sacrifice to create lasting change? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can continue addressing discrimination in healthcare systems. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more powerful, true stories of courage against injustice, and share with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right can truly make a difference. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember that change begins with individuals brave enough to say, "This isn't right," even when it costs them everything. This powerful story reveals how systemic racism in healthcare persists through institutional policies disguised as protocols and resource management. True change requires both individual courage and collective action. Alicia's willingness to risk everything for a single patient created the spark, but lasting transformation needed General Thompson's strategic influence and the support of allies throughout the system. The story demonstrates how discrimination thrives in silence. Only when patterns are documented, exposed, and challenged can meaningful change occur. It also highlights the particular vulnerability of black veterans who face dual discrimination despite their service. We see how institutions protect themselves through intimidation, character assassination, and financial pressure, making the path to justice extraordinarily difficult for individuals without support networks. Most importantly, this narrative shows that change is possible when people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. By transforming one hospital's practices, the ripple effects extend throughout healthcare. Remember that systems don't change merely because it's right. They change when maintaining discriminatory practices becomes more costly than reforming them. The courage to stand alone, even briefly, can inspire others to join, until what began as one person's moral stand becomes a movement powerful enough to transform entrenched systems. Have you or someone you know ever experienced discrimination in healthcare? The courage of people like Alicia reminds us that one person standing up for what's right can truly transform broken systems. How would you have responded in Alicia's position? Follow the rules or follow your conscience? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button to help others find it, and subscribe for more powerful stories of everyday heroes fighting against injustice. Consider sharing this video with someone working in healthcare, or anyone who needs inspiration to stand up against discrimination in their own life. Remember, meaningful change often begins with one person brave enough to say, "This isn't right." You might be that person in your community. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Alicia and General Thompson's fight for justice, and may we all find the courage to create a more equitable world.